So I tried to create a graphic and a visual of what we did in the garden today. As you can see here, these are tree lines, and this is this has bananas in it because often we plant bananas, but in this case we didn't. And you can see these are like the cassavas planted and all the branch cuttings, and there would be seeds and trees in there. The design of exactly where we place the trees is something I do separately, and I kind of lay over because it changes depending on the intention of the garden. So this is mainly for the early stages of growth, what we call the placenta area, and how and what we did for planting there. This is like kind of a zoomed in of the tree line. So if you see here in the bottom right hand corner, then I just show that in more detail. And this will be on a PDF that you guys will all get sent to you if you wanted these details. So it shows, you know, what's the spacing of the cassava, how we have these big mounds of organic material, and hopefully between this and what we did, you'll remember that. There's a Napier grass that we planted along the line, and then I also mentioned some of the seeds that we planted inside of the tree line. Okay? And this information it'll keep coming to you in a bunch of different ways. And then this is kind of a zoom in of the inter-row space, so the space in between the tree lines. And in this case, it's 4.5 meters was just the right size to create the design. And we have walk paths at 3 locations so that you can access the 1 meter planting bed. And these outside grasses, that's going to be the more aggressive growing grass that feeds the trees, either Mombasa, we had Guatemalan grass, we have Napier grass, and Teutonia, the Mexican sunflower. All those 4 could work. And then these other 4 lines are going to be less aggressive grass, like Brachiaria. And all of these grasses, we choose ones that clump as opposed to ones that run, because we don't want to be always fighting against them. So anybody have any questions? In the first section we planted, we did moringa every 1.5 meters as the primary crop, but we'll fill that in with annuals as well, beans and corn or sunflower or something like that. So this is the work that we've been doing today. We'll use this material that comes from this line to feed the trees in the first few years, and this grass to feed the inter-row space for the first few years. Those biomass trees will develop, and then 2 or 3 years we'll start pruning them and getting material. And as the system matures, we'll get more and more material. Earth becomes much more enriched, and all the benefits we talked about yesterday will be available. And I'm not going to, oh yeah, here's kind of partly the inspiration for this sun-loving design comes from this system, which is not entirely syntropic. But what you can see here is I think they did 4 meter spacing. They plant a tree called Inga edulis. And it grows after a few years enough to cover the whole space. And then they come and cut it at chest level once a year. They take the big pieces of wood out or place them along the tree line. And then the leaves they use to mulch in the middle. And this is a program in Honduras where this is the same program that did the beans without any irrigation. But they allow the farmers plant whatever they want in here. And the only problem is Inga doesn't grow great everywhere, and there's not a lot of trees that have that big leaves, so you can't always count on having enough material from your trees to mulch. So in this system we have more tree diversity, which I believe is going to help the soil, and then I use those lines of Brachiaria grass to make up for what might be missing. And part of the inspiration for the grass comes from this system, which is in Brazil, and this farmer has taken several courses on syntropic farming and applied one small principle. So large-scale soy, but what he did is plant lines of Brachiaria here, and then he has modified these grass trimmers so they can come in and cut that grass anytime it's threatening to get bigger. That creates automatic fertilization. He doesn't have to use herbicides, and for him it's a win-win. And for me, I took the inspiration I kind of mixed these 2 systems, so you can see where I got these ideas. So this is the first time I've done it like this specifically, but it's been tested each one separately before. I think we'll get kind of I feel confident it'll work. So I'm not going to go through the other designs, but there's other designs that we use, and hopefully they make a little more sense now that I explained the first one. What I want to do is I want to show one picture, and then I want to go into the second section, which is maybe an hour and a half or so maximum. So we talk about how this can transform soil. And I had an image that I wanted to include, and it should be right here. So this is actually not even in tropical environment. This is from Europe. I think it's Germany, actually. And they planted a syntropic system, and they 2 years into it, they did a comparison. So this is what the soil was like when it started. I think it was just meadow. It was like an orchard. They transitioned an apple orchard into syntropic. So they got this soil from outside of the syntropic. This is basically what it looked like, very clay. You could tell there's not much organic matter. It probably would fail that slake test, the one where you put it in the water and dissolve. And then this is only 2 years. They pulled this out of the tree line. So you made the tree lines like we did. They just found an area where they were not going to disturb the tree. And you can see how it transforms the soil. You can imagine how that's going to infiltrate water better. There's more fertility there. There's probably more earthworms. So this is what we're going for, and I imagine it's even faster in the environment you have down here. Okay. Now let's move on to today's. So of all the different principles that we talk about, there's two that are like really important that we're going to spend some time with them. Okay. This is how I ended the summary yesterday. We talked about all soil has fertility locked up. The microlife unlock it. A dense forest is needed to achieve that. And to grow a syntropic system, we need to remember the 3 C's. What are those 3 C's, everybody?
Cultivate,
Okay, cool. And we finished yesterday, and I showed this sort of complicated slide, but what all it really says is we need to fill these 3 dimensions. Remember the horizontal dimension over the land, the vertical, which is these levels of sun needs, and then the dimension of time to charge the soil battery. So that's a little bit. And that reminds me I should silence my phone. Maybe we all kind of. Okay, so to fill the space over the land vertically, we want to go a little bit more into stratification. And I showed this slide yesterday in these 4 categories. And really, to design a farm, and if you're not sure about a plant, you just need to be able to get it either in the emergent/high, like it's a plant that likes sun, or it's a plant that can tolerate shade, medium or low. If you can separate in either of those 2 categories, you'll be able to place it and use it correctly on the design. But it is really more complicated. You know, Ernst recognizes like many layers. These aren't even all the ones he recognizes. He said there's like 12 different layers in a Amazon rainforest, so there really is a lot more going on. But for the purposes of what we're doing, we can break it down into those 4/2. Okay, anybody want to read this for me? This is just a simple definition of what stratification is. James. Can you read that out loud? Or if anybody else wants to volunteer.
What thing I read?
Yeah, if you could just read it.
On top, stratenum defined, simplified. In an agroforestry system, plants occupy different levels depending on the amount of direct sunlight they need. The names of these levels in order are emergent, high, medium, and low.
Thank you. That's really good. And I want to emphasize one thing. It depends on the amount of sunlight they need, not on the height of the plant. When I first learned this, the height of the plant is important to know, or tree, but that does not determine the level. And there are cases where, for example, cacao can get 2, 3, 4 meters tall, but it needs shade. And there's something called Barbados cherry, which is usually around a 2.5 meter tall tree. It needs full sun. So if you planted those two side by side, they would conflict with each other because the shade would be in full sun and the tree that needs sun would be in the shade. So you need to know, it's important to know the height of the tree so you get them in the correct level, but you can't say that X number, 5 meters means it's a high tree and 8 meters is an emergent tree. The height of a forest vary depending on where you are in the world, and so the height is important, but the level is determined by it's the amount of sun it needs. Okay, and so now let's go through and define. These are some simple working definitions. So if you're not sure, you should be able to look at a tree and look in parks and figure out where they belong. Who can read the emergent slide?
I will. Emergent plants that thrive on full sun and don't tolerate shade. They reach above the top level of surrounding plants, often but not always an elongated tree-shaped or shaped tree or plant.
Okay, so if you look at like a forest, you have a canopy level. Emergent is often the one that's poking up through the top. So these trees that you periodically see that are a little bit higher. So they really do not tolerate anything above them. Okay, who can read the high slide? It's a short one. Annemiek will read it.
High plants that enjoy full sun but tolerate a small amount of shade. They form the top layer.
So that would be like the canopy average size of a forest. And then medium. Who wants to read? Terry.
Medium. Plants that thrive on a mix of sun and shade. They do poorly in full sun or full shade. They form the middle level.
Okay. And then low. Who wants to read low?
Low. Plants that thrive in shade and filtered sun. They form the low level.
Okay. Now, most people recognize these characteristics with trees, but they also apply for annuals and perennials, the placenta plants. So you can look at a vegetable garden and kind of imagine it as a little forest. The plants there also have differing needs of sun. And when you're creating a system, it's important to make sure there's enough sun for those lower levels. You have to space out these sun-loving plants enough so everything is green. And Ernest the way he teaches, it's not the way he actually does it. So I finally figured out what he does because it's kind of complicated. But if you imagine, you can look from different directions. You can imagine there's like a bowl or a concave shape, so that there's more of these lower shade-loving plants than there are the higher ones. And he said that there should be about 20% emergent, 40% high, 60% medium. This is the amount of ground they cover or occupy, the canopy, and 80% low. But what I realized, the ratios of the bowl are correct, but it's not always those. Sometimes, for example, Mombasa forms the bottom layer, and that's really a medium. It's not a low plant, okay? So you don't have to get too hung up on those different stratums. You just have to know that you want this bowl shape, and you don't want it in your system when it's mature. And you don't want it too narrow, and you don't want it too shallow. That's really all you have to know. And you can see when it's too narrow, this is what happens with the eucalyptus. Everything else dies below. There's not enough sun. And then if you do it too wide, you can tell you're not going to have all the benefits of that soil food web. The roots aren't going to intermingle. You're not going to get drought resistance. It's like too dry. So what we want is like Do you guys know the Goldilocks story as a kid? You want the one that's just right, the porridge that's just right. And the porridge that's just right is that intermediate size I showed. And here's kind of, it's sometimes it's hard to visualize what I'm talking about, but we kind of want these dimple sort of spaces over the land so that there's areas where the sun can get down. This is the drone picture I mentioned of Ernest Farm, and I'm sorry, it's really hard to see, but the higher trees you can kind of pick out because they have these white looking trunks. And then in between them there's low areas where he has all of his cocoa plants growing. Okay? So it's a little bit hard to see, but if you can imagine, there's lots of depressions or openings. It's not as dense as a natural forest. Natural forest will get really dense as it gets older, and it's and all the lower plants are dying. Okay. So, oh yeah, thank you. So you can see it's like kind of an open forest or a glade. That's what we're looking for. This is a palm system, a palm oil production system in Brazil. They did in Syntropic. And here you can see it's not always like a bowl shape. Here it's more like there's little carve-outs, you know. And these are the palm trees, and then in these lines are the biomass trees. They're planted kind of back to back to maximize the space. But still, you can see it's like an open forest. I don't know if everybody sees that, but hopefully you understand. And here again, the lines are going this way. It's the same sort of thing. Trying to create kind of an open forest. Because we want all of the plants to maximize their sun absorption and charge the soil.
Like the ridges on a roof sheet.
There you go, yeah, exactly. Corrugated, yes, for that one I could use that. Okay, so we're going to play a little game right now and try to see, I know actually that some of these plants maybe you aren't familiar with because these are what we grow in Haiti, but let's see what people, if you can guess where these different trees belong. And right now you win even if you just get them on the right side, the correct side, the left or the right. But then you get like extra credit if you can figure out if it's medium or low versus emergent or high. So coconut. Anybody want to guess what level coconut is? Emergent. Okay, moringa.
Medium.
I heard medium and emergent. Is that?
Medium.
What about coffee?
Medium.
Okay.
High.
Mahogany.
High.
Lime.
Medium. Medium low.
Okay. Mango.
High.
You guys, some people are going to sour orange. It's the same as normal orange.
Medium.
You get high or medium cacao.
Medium.
And avocado.
High.
And what about soursop? Do you guys know? It's like custard apple. Okay, let's see how you guys do. So the only two emergents are the coconut and the mahogany.
Moringa's high.
Moringa is high, and that's why in the system today I planted it in the area where it'll be getting like full sun. Mango, avocado are high. Most of the fruit trees that people like to consume are high, like a large most of them. With the citrus being kind of the major exception. Usually it's kind of a challenge to you should have more in your system covering the ground on this side than that side. Remember that bowl shape? So it's always a challenge. I'm trying to figure out what can I do to fill those lower layers, and sometimes it's like the grass, the biomass, but if you can come up with some fruit trees, that's like a bonus, right?
Berries.
And yeah, berries. And cacao is actually more like medium low. It's one of these ones where it's, but anyway, for the purposes of what we're doing in planting, I think that's good enough. So that's basically all we really need to know right now about stratification, this different sun needs. Does anybody have any questions before I move on? Okay. So now, so we did the vertical, let's do the dimension of time. So that's succession. We'll have 4 categories that we want to know about. The 2 that are before a forest, early and late placenta, and then early and late forest. Who can read to me, this definition is a big one. This is just a definition of what succession means in a farm or an agroforest. You gave me eye contact here, but it's volunteer if I've ever seen it.
Succession defined. In an agroforestry system, plants can be grown together. That one after the other, create improved soil conditions. If done correctly, each plant will thrive in the conditions provided by the previous plants, so that no external inputs are needed, fertilizers, herbicides, and
Okay, and then now we're going to go through a visual to try to show you what happens with succession. If you're trying to mimic what happens in natural succession on a farm, you might have something like this. They have annuals for the first 4 months: corn, beans, rice. At 1.5 years, you're getting banana or plantain, papaya, pineapple. Then at 5 years, you still could, if managed correctly, be getting bananas, other fruit trees. The palms are productive, your avocado. And anyway, you can see it becomes more and more like a forest, and if you've really included different life cycles of trees, you'll always be getting harvests, and it's changing as the system develops. So that is succession. And again, Ernest has kind of a, he can make it really complicated. He recognizes this many different levels. So he has placenta 1, 2, and 3, and secondary 1, 2, and 3, and climax would be the mature forest. But really, I find that doesn't need to be so complicated in practice. You can get away with just the 4 categories. And okay, next step. So I thought I updated that slide. No, okay. So basically, oh yeah, I did update it. We're going to get to it. So early placenta, who wants to read this one? Basically, early placenta are annuals. Who can read the definition for that?
Early placenta are annuals, plants that fulfill their function in one grow season. These are short-lived annuals such as most vegetables.
Okay. Late placenta.
Late placenta, herbaceous perennials, plants that continue into the next grow season. These are longer living plants that are not trees.
Okay, does that make sense? And who will read early forest?
Trees which grow rapidly and are removed from the system within 20 years. Often these trees have the following characteristics, but not necessarily. They have soft wood, produce many seeds, tolerate poor soil, and are short-lived.
So would moringa be a good example of that? Then?
Moringa would be a great example. So these are short-lived trees, or it's a tree the farmer intends to remove early. So you could have like a timber tree that's ready in 20 years, even though the tree lasts a lot longer. If you're designing it to be removed from the system, then you would be placing that in the early forest category from a practical standpoint.
So your Zambia and your Gietzen are also part of this group?
Yes. Gliricidia, I think, can live more than 20 years, so it's one that depends on the farmer's intention. But Zambia is a good one. There's something called Brazilian fern tree, which has like a green trunk. There's something called trumpet in Haiti that has like a howl trunk, and it's a really good early, fast-growing tree, but dies quickly. Zephyrosia, I don't know if that's a tree or a...
It is. It's a small tree,
oh,
but I think
or
more in the category of Zambia and Lucina.
Yeah. So we want to fill this category because they usually come in quick. They provide the fertility and improve the soil conditions for the later trees. Okay, who can read late forest for me?
Late forest, long-lived trees. Trees that grow slower and last longer. They produce fruits to support Earth's largest animals, including humans, and have harder roots that is good for timber.
Okay. And these are, most of the fruit trees we want to grow are also fitting into this category. So, okay, what do we say here? Yeah. I always get this question and confusion about what these terms mean because we use them in 2 ways. So we use them to describe the system as a whole, And we also use them to describe individual trees or plants in the system. Okay? And it's confusing because right now, what we planted is what stage? Where are we right now, what we just planted in the...
Placenta.
Which placenta? That's right. Early placenta. But within that early placenta, we have we have plants that will mature to all 4 stages, right? So even though it's early placenta, everything's there already. There is late forest trees, I think. Yeah. There's early forest trees. There's late placenta plants. So they're all in there. But so a plant is given the name depending on when it matures. Okay, even though there's Gliricidia in there right now, it's not mature. So that'll mature and be creating a presence more in the late forest than it does the other stages. So does that make sense? Okay. And then, we do our best to plant all of these different trees and plants at the same time. The system tends to develop, and after a few years, the forest will kind of close for new members. It gets harder to introduce, with some exceptions, it gets harder to introduce new trees. So we do our best to introduce everything in the beginning. It's not a hard, fast rule. Sometimes I find that something failed and I'll reintroduce it, but the goal is to try to start it all at the same time. Okay, now we're going to do another matching game. So this time, let's try to figure out where these plants fall in these different stages of succession, okay? We're still talking about the dimension of time. Corn. Early placenta. Beans. How about pigeon pea?
Late placenta.
Medium placenta.
Oh, you're getting into the complicated Ernst. Okay, coconut.
Late forest.
Mahogany.
Late forest.
Yeah, sweet potato.
Early placenta.
Cassava.
Late placenta.
Medium.
Pumpkin.
Early.
Plantain.
Early forest.
Late placenta.
Lime.
Early forest.
Sour orange.
Early forest.
Papaya.
Late placenta.
Late placenta. Early forest.
Hot peppers.
Yeah, early to late.
Yeah, depending on the variety, if it's annual or biannual. But millet. Cacao.
Late placenta. Early forest.
Coffee. Cabbage. Eggplant. Avocado.
The first.
Soursop. You have to
Early
guess now.
forest.
Okay, sugar cane. How about that one?
Late placenta.
Pineapple.
Medium. 2 years.
Okra. Tomato. Onion. Mombasa.
All the time.
Placenta, early forest.
Moringa.
Early forest.
And mango. Okay.
Oh wow.
So let's see.
Okay.
Most of the fruit trees were all in late forest. Moringa is really the only one that I would consider, unless you were to remove it intentionally earlier, then you could move one of those trees up there.
But would they start producing earlier potentially?
Which,
Or so that's just their entire life cycle in there. It's not about production when they start producing.
No, it's-
Because they're there permanent.
it's if a tree is in the system more than 20 years, I would consider it a late forest. But you can break it up into much more levels. But I think from a standpoint of a farmer, you have kind of like it's usually timber that you're removing or biomass trees. So you want to make sure you have some that are in there those first 20 years, and then you want to make sure everything else is lasting. And if you're planting biomass trees, like I said yesterday, you want to make sure they're lasting as long as the fruit trees that they're a mother to. Okay. And so what we've done, I've taken just the early placenta species that we just figured out. Now let's see, this is something that's a little challenging because most of us don't think of the sun needs of vegetables and annuals. But it's there. These are like a little forest. So I'm very forgiving on this slide because most people have no idea what these needs are. And yeah, so corn, what would you guys guess?
Emergent.
You got an emergent? How about beans, like a bush bean, like the
Low.
low?
High.
High, we gotta guess high. Sweet potato,
No.
pumpkin,
No.
The
Hop.
medium.
hot pepper,
Aye.
millet, cabbage, eggplant,
High.
okra,
High.
tomato,
High.
and onion.
Low.
And
Medium.
some of these, it's how they function as a unit. So like beans come in quick and exit quick. And so you can plant them with under other plants, but I think he calls it, I think it's low or medium. Let's see what they are. Beans are considered low because of the way you design your system, but in reality they're getting a lot of sun in the beginning because they're so quick to get out there. But then they can tolerate a little bit of shade. And what's also confusing is in conventional farming, some low and medium level plants a lot of these plants are often placed in full sun condition. Just like coffee and cacao are sometimes grown in full sun even, and they can produce, but they're happier in a shade system.
Cabbage is hot.
Yeah.
I would even have put it emergent.
I'm not the one who came up with these, and maybe
I think you
it's
should redo it.
maybe it'll be changed at some point. But okay, let's do it for late placenta. What do you guys think about pigeon pea?
Quite quick, so.
Medium.
Emergent or high? Cassava.
High.
Okay, high plantain or and banana and plantain. It depends a little bit on the species, but papaya, emergent, sugar cane, pineapple,
Medium. Low.
medium low, Mombasa.
That's quite full, isn't it?
It is tall, but in
Sure.
fact, Mombasa in its natural original setting was probably low. It would grow at the bottom of forests, but it's been bred to be in full sun. And I feel like now it behaves more like a medium. And you guys pretty much got the rest right. I would agree, like pigeon pea is kind of halfway between emergent or high. It can...
Mombasa you're talking about is that, what is it, Guatemala?
It's similar to the Guatemalan grass, but it's Panica maximum variety that grows like 3 meters tall in clumps, really huge. You're gonna have
Like the one we cut this morning.
yeah, but it's different. It's different. Yeah, and it can tolerate. One of the advantages in an agroforestry system is it keeps producing later as the shade comes in, where most grasses will start to bow out because they can't tolerate it. So Mombasa is definitely able to continue in the shade, but eventually it does weaken like basically all grasses. Okay, so we're getting to almost the end of this activity. So basically, when you're trying to figure out associations, basically you can put plants almost in the exact same spot as long as they don't have the same level of stratification and stage of succession. So if they need the same amount of sun and they're alive at the same time, you can't put them in the same place, so conflict. Okay? They need their spacing, whatever their canopy size is. But if you have trees that need the same amount of sun, but one of the or plants, one of them has a short life cycle and one is a long life cycle, they're not going to conflict, right? They're going to be maturing at different times, so they won't conflict. So, okay, so we'll play a little game to kind of ease in cassava. I think this system will, will have that late placenta, and that's the point where you're accumulating. So when it comes to choosing biomass plants, you don't have to choose the ones I have, and I think it's good to experiment. And there can be natural species growing in the area that are working. here's some of the, who wants to read some of these are the features that you might look for as a good candidate.
I can. Fills
Okay.
an empty niche in the consortium. Germinates easily or grows from seed or stick. Thrives in the current soil conditions and regrows after heavy pruning. Stays where you plant it. Doesn't spread out or control. So like a clumping grass, not a running grass. No thorns, if you want to deal with thorns. And not a desirable food source. So you're not tempted to cut it down.
Yeah, to leave it there when you need to cut it down. Yeah, okay. Okay, I just see something I'm going to change. I'm just going to make quick. And I think what I'm trying to say here is just propagates easy. So in Haiti, we're trying to do this without tree nurseries, but you guys have tree nurseries, so maybe I would change the wording a little bit and just say the second point I'm trying to make is it's just easy to propagate. It's not a lot of work. It's not like a real finicky plant. That would be an ideal feature. Okay, what's the next slide? Okay, so now we've been talking about consortium. Here's maybe a definition of it, and then I'll have an image to show. Do you want to read?
A dense mix of plants and trees that fill all the niches and the levels of strata and stages of succession.
Okay. And should have biomass plants, right? Okay, so this is some of the common species we use in Haiti. This looks kind of busy, but what I tried to do was show these 4 stages, right? We know we need those filled. The annuals, the perennials, short-lived trees, and long-lived trees. And then what I've tried to show is here is we don't have to fill all 4 levels of stratification. We can really just make sure you have at each stage something that does well in shade and something that does well in sun. And we normally match those 2 up. So at one point, Ernest was trying to match up all 4 in one tree line. So he would have like an emergent, a mahogany with an avocado, but it was insane how high the system would get because you had to have, each had to have its space, and it was impossible. So then he finally was like, you know what, you can just have a sun-loving with a shade tolerant. And often he would match like an emergent with a medium and a high with a low, but it doesn't really matter. I found it doesn't matter. You just need to match one with the other. And you want a little bit more from this category than that category to create that open forest feeling. So that's basically it. So what we've got is 8 spots you need to fill. Can you see the colors? The 8 different colors? So that's
early forest then.
What's that?
You're missing things of early forest.
Okay, did everybody hear that? I don't have anything here. What? What am I doing? And so actually there is something there. And what, I'm glad you pointed it out.
It's the stuff from the late forest.
Yes. So basically trees, most all trees, even if they're sun loving, when they're young they need shade. And so a lot of these trees are slow to grow in this late forest section. But you know what? It's all of these are filling this category at that level. So as you have all your fast-growing trees, it says Vania, the moringa jumping up, you'll have all these other later forest trees below them occupying that tree line. And then also what you have is the Mombasa grass is usually lasting into that. So it's kind of getting filled from this category and this category. And it's hard to find. There probably are some low shade-loving, short-lived trees, but in reality what I see is you have these other plants that are filling that niche, even though that's not really their title. Okay. And okay. So this is kind of this is a way to visualize a cycle of succession. So when a forest starts and you have bare soil, and this is more for natural forest, and then you have the early forest and then the late forest, right? 250, 300 years. I think this is kind of a bonus principle that you guys can understand this, but most people, in our lifetime, we look at a forest as a static thing. It's just like, we think of it as it's just always like that, you know, but the reality is forests do die. they get knocked over by storms. Eventually trees get to the end of their life cycle and they die. This might be a good average age. There are trees that are living thousands of years. And then what's important to understand is there's a whole nother, this pattern can repeat itself. Okay? And what's interesting is it doesn't go back to zero here. The fertility in the soil, as we can imagine, it's improving as we will go across this timeline. And when you start here, you can have a whole different type of forest. There will be different trees that can grow in better conditions. And then they move things forward even further. And I call these, what do I call these? I think I have it on here. Stages of, I forget what I call it, but phases of evolution. Phases of evolution. And so what we have here, if you imagined like major disturbance, like a volcanic, where we're down to bedrock, or you're down to like below the topsoil layer, subsoil, then you're starting with very, very hardy plants. And these are hundreds of years you're talking about here, where you're getting a forest growing, dying, and then another one. And then Ernest has recognized this pattern. He calls that first stage colonizer. And he calls this second stage, evolutional stage, as accumulation. And the last one is abundance. And he says at this could be like lichen and tiny little plants and stuff. This stage is when your land is able to feed a cat-sized animal. And then this is like a normal cat, not the ones you guys have. And then this would be like a human or size or a large animal. The system it's creating enough fertility out of thin air to feed humans. And what he states is he believes most land has been reverted through commercial farming back into this accumulation phase. And if we had to wait for nature, it could be 250, 300 years for that to restore itself. Okay? And I try to do that at the end of the lecture, because a lot of times people confuse these three things with the placenta and early forest and those, because it's kind of a similar concept. But just the idea is that forests do evolve over time. And most of us farmers are working in this area, and we want to be over here. And the reason we have a lot of disease issues with our plants, because we're planting plants that are accustomed to this type of soil in this type of system, you see? And instead of waiting, syntropic farming helps us skip here because of the 3 C's that we talked about, especially the cutting, okay? And that's basically the material I have for this portion of the lecture. I have this slide at the end, and there's some other more detailed lists of different plants and the different stratums they come in. Here, as you can see, I didn't simplify the placentas in case somebody's really focused on growing these short-lived cycles. You need to know, most of you guys already know the life cycles of these different plants, and you can pair them up better if you know that. And for those who are familiar with permaculture, one of the things I felt that syntropic farming added was it took the mystery out of companion planting. So I don't know who knows what permaculture is, but it's similar to syntropic farming, and then it's a type of farming that's helping to build soil. And there's often suggestions on what you can plant together, like the 3 sisters everybody knows, corn, beans, and maize. But there's also a lot of other plants, like borage can be planted with strawberries, and I can remember when I tried to learn that, there was never an explanation for why they did well. It was always like magical, you know. And then after I learned this, I realized, actually there's probably a lot of potential associations you can make from plants if you know their solar needs and their life cycle. And it kind of took the mystery out of that. And now I'm like mixing things together and seeing how they work.
All the magic.
Yes, I'm ruining the magic, but having a lot of fun. And there still are some kind of magical associations out there. Some plants that really do deter, animal attacks and that sort of thing. I think that's the last image. So I have other material, but I don't know, 320. How is people's energy? I have like a design section I could go into a little bit, but maybe we could take a little break right now, and we could just skip a little bit into that. Or I also have like actually what might be better, I have like slides where we go over what we did in the garden, kind of rehash the different steps in the planting. Still kind of early, burn through that. So why don't everybody want to go ahead and take a 10-minute break. We'll come back and we'll do a short section here at the end. I do the design in 2 stages. I design like the placenta stage and then the forest stage. You know, the placenta stage, I kind of showed you those designs out just now and what we did. And then the forest stage that's more complicated, especially if you're doing like a commercial system where you really want to maximize your space and all that. But that's too much for what we're doing today.
Then you have to come back again.
Exactly. Yeah, and there we go. Job security.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's my image. Daniel, thank you for sharing this cool coffee system. Okay, so this is what we do in Haiti. We divide and create teams, and we tried to do that here a little bit. It got a little bit out of hand because there's so many people kind of ganged up on me a little bit, but normally I try to keep everybody's participating and they feel like they've helped. And this is a little system we did at a university in Haiti with a Belgian team member, Harvey, and myself planted this. And all of this mulch material, we didn't have enough grass, so it actually came from a mango tree. So I climbed up, took the top off, we got the wood and the leaf, and we put a little bit of grass on top. So there's kind of a sequence of work, and it might be different depending on what resources you have. But before I get started, I'm trying to gather seeds, gather branch cuttings, and organic material. And then the next is to prepare the tree rows, which if you guys remember, I first took off the grass and then trenched using the double dig. Then we plant the bananas or large seedlings, anything that's going to be hard to get in after you put the organic material down. And then we come in, we plant the rest of the trees by seed or stick. And then we come to the B area, which is also is another name for the interrow. So let's see what that looks like. I encourage, in part of our training in Haiti, we have a section that's seed collection, because there you can't go to the store and buy stuff. Most of the biomass trees aren't really valued. And so I think it's legitimate for you guys to be doing this here too, because a lot of the seeds are free. You have a lot of good trees, and there's no reason you can't just become accustomed. Some of the seeds I planted today, I collected 2 days ago when I came here, and I saw senna, which I knew was a good one. And I saw there were some brown seed pods, popped them open, look up online. I happen to know that one. It benefits from a scarification, so I put it in hot water for a few minutes. This is, I think, Albizia Lebec. This is another tree we use, grows real easy from direct seed planting. So in the beginning, throwing a bunch of seeds in and seeing which ones do the best, and then as you develop more of your system, you can narrow it down to the trees that are doing the best. So it's good to start small if you're doing it, a large area, and then expand. You can learn from your first trials, especially if you do. Notice how we use different types of grass and different trees. We're going to kind of see what works best, and then later maybe you narrow down to 1 or 2 things. So you get that part, and then also this can serve as a nursery bed for the rest of your system. So like a lot of these plants you can propagate from branch cuttings, or you're getting seeds, and so you can plant the rest of the area for free. And then we talked about row orientation. Anybody tell me why north-south is the best orientation if you're favoring the trees?
Because it gets more sunlight.
The trees get the maximum amount of sunlight. And what are some exceptions where you might plant in a different row orientation? So like we did today, if you're favoring the planting beds in between. And there's one other exception where I may not plant in the north-south direction.
If you're on a hill.
if you're on a hill.
Okay.
So then you're going to follow contour because of the, and what's amazing is these systems, if you plant them densely, will really stop almost all the rain. And that line of grass that we planted, it becomes a hedgerow, which can literally be like a living terrace. There's, we've done this in Haiti on really steep areas. We'll plant the grass, it forms like a wall, and it literally will form a terrace. Vetiver is well known to be the best grass for that, but Napier, Mombasa, any of these grasses work if you plant them densely, so it literally will stop you from losing soil. And so we plant on contour.
Would vetiver be a grass that you would grow instead of your brachiaria inside the interrow section, or would it be one that you would plant on the side of your tree rows?
So she asked about where would I use vetiver. Probably I would use it instead of the brachiaria because for two reasons. One is it doesn't produce as much biomass as a lot of the other grasses, so it's not going to be as productive for the tree line, and that's an advantage for the veggie beds too because it's not requiring as frequent cutting, and also because it's more sun dependent than the Mombasa and some of these other grasses, so it really is sensitive in it. It might not even be a good one for some systems. It might just start to die on you, you know.
Right.
But it is aromatic and it has that, you know, other medicinal element that probably is really good at preventing disease. So it'd be something worth to try. Yeah, if I had vetiver, I'd probably try it.
I've got vetiver which has been growing for years under shade, completely under shade.
And
Mine
how
goes
is the
further
plant?
under
Alright,
shade,
it's
yeah.
only about that high, but we cut it down.
Yeah, and you face fairly, I mean,
Stems.
so that,
Stems. It's very good.
because when we grow it in direct sun, if we put like a piece that big in within a year and a half, it's like this big around, and it's
Okay.
2.5 meters tall. It's huge.
Okay, that's the difference.
And then, I mean, it grows like, yeah, really intensely in Haiti. But in the agroforestry systems, like the one I showed at the end of my presentation yesterday, that was a 5-year system. He used vetiver as his primary grass, and he was like, oh man, I only have like, I'm getting just the smallest amount of grass from it. Like it had, but it didn't die. It didn't die in his system either.
Well, I've got it in between, in a tree line, in my regular beds.
Yeah.
And there it seems to be quite happy and good for us to sort of come and trim it every so often. But I haven't measured like the harvest of it
Yeah.
in a way. It just seems to be quite happy there. But it doesn't go too meters high. It just
Okay. Yeah, vetiver is great. It doesn't spread by seed either. So it really just stays where you put it. So, okay, row orientation. I think we're good there. Trench preparation. This is just a repeat of what I talked about yesterday. You want to determine where the compaction level is, break through that so the roots can make their way deeper. And I tried to create a little graphic to show, or here's the, first we actually dig that trench till we get to that hard level. Then you poke the pick in and pop it open without disturbing that lower level too much. Most of your fertility is in that top level, so you don't want to mix the soil too much. Keep the lower stuff low and the higher stuff high. So this is my attempt to try that. I don't know if you get this, try like one depth here, you know, and then here we're just digging the hole and popping it and pulling it back out. Double dig. And of course, with if you guys have other tools, you might find other ways. In Michigan, I used a spade. The tool, the soil's a little softer. I dig a trench with a spade, and then I have a 4-tine digging fork, which is like a really strong pitchfork, and I just put that in, twist it, and pop up the soil. So it doesn't have to be these tools necessarily. So okay, now let's say we've finished the planting, preparing the trench. We're going to shape the bed so we want that so the nutrients come into the tree line, and then remember to test with a machete that you did a good job with your digging. That's a nice little trick. And then we're moving into the B area, or the interrow. These are older term I use for that. And I like to call that shaving the grass. So we're going to try to keep as much topsoil, but just prevent the weeds and things that are there to grow back. Here's kind of an image of us doing that in Haiti. And this is actually a good slide because we didn't plant a banana. Okay, I showed you guys how to cut the banana so that it's a bowl shape, right? So we learned about that, and we talked about having grandma, mother, and baby. And so that's all known. What I've noticed here, I don't know if that's true up in here, but in what I've noticed in the south where we're planting, and I asked for bananas, I got the smallest little suckers. That's what was brought, and they were expecting me to plant. And I don't know how they grow, but I imagine it's very slow and weaker. What I'm used to doing is, for example, if you had two mothers like we had today, and we cut one like that, is we would cut that and then harvest that corn right there. And we'd get a big one. I'd always get a big one like that. And then we would cut down the pseudostem until it's shorter on a 45-degree angle. And actually we'd normally remove any of the other big growth buds here, so you're sending all of its energy into the one area. And then we plant it on its head. So this, actually not exactly like this, pretty close. So normally if you have a banana clump under the earth, a new banana shoot will grow sideways off the mother and then come up, and it creates like a hook or an anchor that stabilizes it. And most people come in and they plant the banana that you've harvested just upright, so there's no hook, it's literally just going straight up. So what we do in Syntropics, we turn it and plant the banana on the head. Usually I plant it so this is vertical, just like it, and the new growth comes off just like it would a mother. And then it grows, forms a hook, and comes up. This takes a little bit longer than if you had planted it straight up, but then it produces a stronger rooted plant. So that's something we didn't do, but I think you guys, and to be honest with you, it's not like rocket science. You could plant it like this. You could plant it. You could literally just throw it in on its head, and it'll curve and find its way up. Especially if you have a big corm like this. And we'll usually clean it off, scrape all these little hairy roots off. We'll shave those because those aren't going to survive anyway. And then while you're doing that, you can look. Sometimes you'll find a larva in there or a little part that's rotten, and it'll carve that out. Try to get a nice clean banana before planting.
Well, we were taught it in a little bit more detail.
Uh-huh.
That you do cut that little lump, and then that part where you cut the trunk off
The pseudostem.
goes flat, is being facing down,
Uh-huh.
but always facing east.
Yeah.
So it's planted like that in the soil.
And then what's the intention? What's the reason for the east?
Well, there does seem to be, the banana does seem to have reactions to north-south.
Uh-huh.
So whether that has something to do with it, or whether it automatically means therefore the first shoot will come on one side,
Uh-huh.
I don't know. But we were basically taught to
Plant to the east.
go and face east with your.
Okay.
And I also don't know if that might mean that you have plants that are very sensitive, that if you started them in one position, that you don't want to change them halfway, and when you then transplant it somewhere else, that they face in a different direction.
Yeah, maybe.
That they are sensitive to that. So we go one step further by saying no.
East.
Face it
Okay,
east.
I can't comment on that, but I have had like one Syntropic person taught me to plant them literally this cut part down, and then someone else on an angle, and then the way the person explained this way, it made sense to me, but all the ones I planted down did fine.
Yeah.
So
no, that root bit, and
it finds its way.
It has to start with a fresh shoot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can cut them in half.
And that's true too, especially.
You can cut in half if you don't have a lot of material.
Yeah, and you don't kill that part. Yeah, you let it come out there. Yeah, if you don't have a lot, you can cut them in half. They're just a little bit weaker, a little less energy.
But
So,
they produce faster and bigger plant than the suckers.
Yeah.
Commercially, it's actually better. In the old days, they used to plant that system to get the best stands.
These ones.
Yeah. Now they use tissue culture, which is really different. But yeah.
Yeah, because when I had somebody get some of the materials for me in advance, and what they came with all these little tiny bananas, and I was like, I don't even know. I was afraid to cut it and plant it on its head. It was so small, and probably will plant those right side up and just see how they compare. But we went and harvested our own because I wanted to make sure I had some good ones.
You plant orientation because you actually want the next shoot to come out in the direction. Because when the bunch comes out,
Yeah.
you don't want the bunch to come out on to the next sucker.
Yeah.
Because you get a lot of damage on the bunch.
Yeah.
So the bunch will normally come out facing east, and you want to walk the banana tree
West.
in that direction, west, so that each time the bunch is never going to fall on top of the new sucker coming out, so that you don't get damage to the banana.
So
bunch.
that's why you turn it the head towards east.
That would probably be one of the reasons.
Okay. Okay, and then that's just us doing it. And then after you planted the bananas, and we don't have the big seedlings, but here we also planted big seedlings, and you guys remember we came in, we placed wood, leaves, and mulched the system. And then, yeah, this is maybe less relevant here, but I tried to show, this is actually the same tree before, and then after. It's hard to see, but the top is gone, and you can see these are now the leaders on this mango, which we're kind of doing them a favor. We're doing the pruning you're talking about, lowering the mango so the fruit's a little easier to get, and then we're getting material that we need. This is if you're in like a really resource limited situation. We take the top and we have material to plant. And then sometimes we'll also take, this is the tropical oak. It has a Creole name, and they know that they can prune it intensely and it always grows back. So we'll sometimes take material like that, or like that this is a eucalyptus. These are the pictures I was showing before, same thing. And then also, as you guys already know, you can just take from the field and use a grass sickle. These are all different ways to harvest material. Also, I think I mentioned the other day, if there's industries in your area where they're having a bunch of waste material, wood chips from the city recycling program, we have sugarcane waste and vetiver waste, and maybe things like that. Sometimes wheat programs will have a bunch of what's it called, the chaff. There's a special name for it, but yeah. Yes. So you can use that. The only thing that I'd be careful with is sawdust. It can mat down and prevent like rain from entering.
Termites.
It could attract termites. Maybe shavings might be a little bit better, or chips, but dust is challenging. And then here's us making, these are probably moringa seeds, and there's probably multiple other tree seeds in here. This is Mauro. This is a guy from Brazil who's taught me a lot of what I know and has been real helpful in our program. He's making a seed mix here with some compost, and this is what we're planting in between those little cassava homes in the tree lines. Just kind of a recap, and then this is how we make those cassava plantings every meter. Any questions there? Here's a picture. And then arranging the wood, bringing all that material that we talked about earlier, collecting and mulching with it.
And even, I know you prefer green wood, but do you also prefer green grass to mulch, or is that either or?
I think it's better. Yeah, I think it's better when it's fresh. It's probably got more like life forms on it too. It's more biologically active, but we don't have it with these. As you can see, we're using like real dry stuff here. And then after, so you kind of plant the big things in the trench, put the organic material in, and then come with those little things, cuttings and seeds. And I think this is the same, more or less, picture that I had showed you guys earlier, so this is just for review. And you can, one of the lines we didn't put the cassava, but I put pigeon pea in there, so we have a late placenta to provide some coverage. And then in this case, where the soil was really bad, this whole area in here we're planting grass. I think I have the design here. And we plant the Mombasa grass in lines. and you have to trench 2-3 centimeters, something like that. Plant that. Mombasa grass takes a little time for its momentum, so we're also producing food for them. So there's like beans every 20 centimeters. There's 2 lines of corn, and then we plant pigeon pea in the middle, so they're getting some food out of here while you're waiting for the grass. And then in those, after those are harvested, we're pulling the grass for feeding the trees. That's kind of how that system works. And there's myself and Harvey and a local farmer that helped us that day in the work. And then you have to remember planting is only, Ernest says planting is like 10% and 90% of important activity is the management. So it's like you got to remember to come back when it's looking like a mess like this, to don't be afraid to cut it aggressively if it's rainy season. And then just to recap on what we did in the management. So like when we came into a system and it's starting to overgrown, we want to selectively weed around the trees, usually 15 to 20 centimeters around each tree. You want to pull anything that's growing right there, or just cut it if it's something that's not too aggressive. Then we're going to also prune all those. After you do that, you first want to, we don't like to put the biomass right on top of the weeds. A lot of times they just grow back stronger. So you first have to weed. Now you're creating that like bare area where you can mulch. And then you're going to come in, take those grasses that are growing that you planted for biomass, put that down. If there's trees, you'll put the wood first, okay? And then you'll want to go through your line and notice any of the future trees that you're really important. And you're going to create a little space for them if they're starting to get too shaded or blocked in. And we often plant one more trees than we need, and we'll thin some when they start conflicting with each other. So this is a system that had been weeded, and then you can see mulched on both sides. And that actually might be a lot what yours looks like. See, there's no bananas in here in the future. I wish I'd had more biomass growing in the center, but that could be kind of like what the system we planted here could look like.
But then in the existing system, with the cooling done, there will be a lot more light. No, should I then not also plant again in the tree line?
You totally can.
That's kind of
you
the
can.
angle stuff that could go there.
You can. We do that all the time. We could plant another round of corn and beans. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Early and late placenta.
Yes, there you go. And then this is what I was trying to describe. You know, usually we try to weed so well in the beginning that there's not a lot of management. But if you really, if you do have a lot of stuff growing, you can try to just leave the root system of certain plants if you know that they're not going to grow back. That's ideal. But if you know it's grass or vine or something like that, that will grow back if you cut it, then you want to try to remove the root systems as long as you're not going to damage a super small seedling. And then like that wandering Jew plant, there's some things that you really want to remove the roots and remove completely. There's kind of these 3 different levels of work that you need to do depending on what your, most of the time I'm dealing with these sort of things, so it's pretty easy. I'm just going through and in that little area around the tree or the pineapple or whatever, I'm just pulling everything out, using it as mulch. These would be some like herbs at least that we encounter in Haiti that I can just cut and keep the roots in. These are like the vine that I would normally pull and then keep as mulch. And then you guys know this plant. I think I hammered that one in. This is one we don't want in the system. And then here's us pruning in a system that's in 1.5 years old, something like that, or a year-old system. So what would this system be classified as a whole from a succession standpoint if it's over a year old? Late what? Late placenta, exactly. And that's chaya, mostly chaya and cassava that we were working with right there. And then as I'm doing that work, it's very challenging at first. You know, we're planting all from seeds. So we had these mangoes. I think this is a kashiman, custard apple, This is maybe a tamarind here. We had all this stuff growing, and you had to be careful because like every meter or two you encounter that, so you're like, okay, I gotta not pulling this out, you know. But if you planted it, usually you're pretty good at recognizing the trees and you're protecting them. And then this is a cycle. You keep repeating the management like this, and as the system develops, it gets easier. You're less on your legs. You're doing more of just pruning the trees. This is Paraguay, the other Brazilian who's been coming to Haiti. In his system, this is that little system that resisted fire. So this is actually that same one. It's called his reserve. And yeah, you can see how dense and fertile this is. So that's all I have for the training. Really appreciate y'all coming out. If anybody has any questions. So if I did good, you're sort of swimming with information. But hopefully a couple things stick. It's just it just is a lot of information, but I think if people want to do this and do a little area like we did, it becomes more clear as you practice it. And there's a certain muscle memory. Once you start to do the work, you remember, you get out there, you know what you have to do, and it's like not so overwhelming. So I encourage those who have land and are able to go out and try to do this. Look at these PDFs that we'll send you later and see what you can do. Okay. Yeah, you're welcome.
Come back and visit us again.
Okay. It's easy to get me here during the winter time in Michigan because it's so dark and cold. It's like, yeah, depressing there.
Oh, you want to come when it's nice, do you?
Well, the other thing is when it's your winter, it's the Haitian grow season. You guys are exact opposites, so it's kind of like two perfect regions for me to be working in. And neither are, you're on like different cycles, so there's no conflict.
Seasonal traveller.
Yeah, I'll be up. I don't know if you call it we call it a snowbird where we live. There's people who live in Michigan in the summer because it's cooler and it's nice, and then when the winter comes, they go to Florida or Arizona or something like that.
Nothing wrong with that lifestyle.
Yeah, of course, that's the luxury, yeah.